Hi guys, so we just recorded part one of the video, which is actually looking at a residency, which is the country you would be living in to get that tax residence, right? For you to allow to actually structure your business in an international tax-free sense, right? So, once you've gone and picked this, we did actually focus and favour UAE, but it all depends on your individual objectives, right? So that's very interesting. If you did not go ahead and watch that video, I'd probably go ahead and do so. It's a short 7-8 minute video, and I just briefly look over the most attractive residencies currently in 2025 right now in summer. But unless you're structured correctly, you're still going to get taxed, right? So in part two, just going to mention, we are going to be focusing on the exact frameworks for holding companies, operational companies, and bank accounts that'll be working in 2025. And again, there's been a global shift in business structuring. The old single offshore company model is dead. Now banks and regulators. Sorry to interrupt here, guys. However, most entrepreneurs are actually overpaying in taxes and leaving their wealth exposed in just one country. That's why I've now gone and created Structure, Protect, and Expand. And this is the offshore wealth method that shows you how to protect your assets, reduce taxes, and unlock global opportunities. So the enrollment is actually opening soon. Spots are limited, and you can join the early access waiting list through the link in the bio below. Cheers, guys. Hope you enjoy the video as well. I'm very reluctant to actually be touching it. So it has to be structured in a much different manner, right? So there's new rules in substance, new rules in reporting, new rules in compliance. We've got OECD, EU AMLA, UAE corporate tax as well now coming into play as well. Smart founders are now basically using layered structures with clear logic of the holding and operational banking, right? It is usually a little bit different. It is adjusting as we're going into 2025, right? And progressing through into 2030. Alignment goals with, the World Economic Forum, governments around the world. Again, they are scrutinizing offshore tax structures. So how do you position yourselves in the actual corporate structure? We are going to look at that blueprint right now today. And again, if you haven't got a met me before, if it is your first time meeting me, it's Will from Forward Point Solutions. And again, we basically help clients around the world look at the best opportunities for themselves and their businesses of how they can, profit the most essentially and live the best life. So starting off, we're going to break it into 3 tiers. Number 1 is the holding companies. So holding companies is the purpose is usually to own shares, IP, brand, investments. Very common to do this, right? It has been for years and it always essentially will be. Best jurisdictions we typically see with clients and their interests and what actually kind of gets set up in the end game is BVI, Luxembourg, Guernsey, and Nevis. And this is depending on the client's objectives. They're all fantastic jurisdictions, but it's case by case, right? So it really depends on what you need, what you're looking for, what your business is, X, Y, Z, So the key benefits here is asset protection plus tax efficient exits. And again, you do need to be living in one of those tax residencies, which I mentioned in the previous video, that allows you to operate in such a manner legally. So moving on to the actual second tier, that would be an operational company. And this is your client facing and contracts and stuff, right? So typical jurisdictions is UAE free zones, Ireland, Cyprus, Panama, right? Depending on where you're living, depending on where your clients are, it's basically you got to choose where your clients are and where the payment processors will be accepting those invoices. So if you're wanting to use Stripe or PayPal, that's going to be very different, as you're not going to be onboarded with Stripe or PayPal with a Panama company, essentially, right? But the personal residency link here, as example, a UAE residency, most likely you'll have a UAE free zone company. You have 0% personal income tax and low corporate tax as well. There is some exemptions as well on below, I think, like 190K AED or 300K AED, about $125,000, $155,000. You can still get low corporate tax over in the UAE. Or you're looking at a Cyprus non-dom and a Cyprus LTD for the EU credibility to actually get that residence there, or vice versa. Over in Panama, as you mentioned, Panama could be a fantastic residency choice for you. If you were interested in any of these options, feel free to book a meeting below, drop me an email, and we can answer those questions and hopefully help you out from Forward Point Solutions. And finally, there's a Panama permanent residence, and that would be you'd basically get a Panama SA, and that would be for Latin American trade. If your target market is Latin America, potentially that is a very good system to have. So again, with actual banking are we can tier them in 3 different sections, the same as we just did for the corporate solutions. And essentially, with stable banks, number one, you're looking at Switzerland, Luxembourg, and Singapore. This is for your main holdings, right? Maybe private banking solutions, investment solutions through these banks as well, can be very common as well. We've then got tier 2, which is like UAE, Lithuania, Cyprus, and this is for daily payments. Okay, then tier 3, which is then crypto rails, such as UAE, VARA compliant exchanges, Panama friendly OTC desks, could be very common as well, right? But the rule here is always separate client money, corporate money, and personal money. It's just a pure rule in the playbook as such, in the blueprint that should be going on, right? So case studies here that we can potentially look at. Number one, we would have a UAE resident, right? And he would obviously typically have a UAE company in a free zone, like an FZ, right? That he would have got his residence and his Emirates ID card here. So he would have a UAE residence, a BVI holding company, using his UAE company, where he gets his residence from, to actually do his client-facing payments. And again, you could also look at a Swiss bank account with this one here. That's more for maybe a crypto founding guy, like a crypto entrepreneur. When we move to SaaS, right, a SaaS founder might have a Cyprus non-dom residence, Ireland LTD for his EU clients, and a Guernsey IP holdco, right, to hold that IP actual agreements. And obviously payments are then processed through Ireland. You can now be onboarding with Stripe. You can be onboarding with those payment processes, which you probably need to for your SaaS business, right? Then there's the e-commerce nomad. Typically, digital nomad lives in Bali, lives in Paraguay, lives in Brazil, just spending a few days everywhere, and his tax residence is over in Paraguay. He'd probably look at a Panama Corp with a US LLC for Stripe and Amazon, and plus there's some Latin American banks, right? Very common. It really depends on objective by objective, case by case, as I've mentioned many times in this series so far. And again, what is changing is compliance and substance, especially in 2025. We've seen a massive ramp up in scrutiny, especially in the banking side of the entire world. It's becoming, there's a huge customer acquisition cost, and banks are really reluctant to be onboarding any type of high risk kind of structure, right? So minimal substance is no longer enough. For example, local directors and, real office leases in UAE are now basically mandatory, right? At least one employee or service contract with an EU operational company, right? And again, there's got to be bookkeeping and annual filings, even offshore, are now being reported, right? But the general message here is to play it clean, play it great, and you will survive long term. If you take shortcuts, it's probably not worthwhile long term, right? You're probably going to get found out. So just set things up properly, and at the end of the day, it's all fantastic there. So this is essentially part 2, just a brief message about, those few type of case studies and scenarios, and you really have to think about where your customers are, where your holding is. Essentially, it can be very flexible. With more and more flexibility comes more and more complexities, especially in banking, with this always increasing regulatory pressure on offshore structures, right? So in the next video, we're going to be focused on part 3. Part 3 is exactly which banks, which fintechs, and also which software you're probably going to be using for your business, right? Obviously, we haven't really touched too much on software before, but a lot of entrepreneurs, are using software. And again, if you are starting out, you do want to become an entrepreneur or live in a more expat environment, right? And have your tax residency minimalized as close as possible to 0, and potentially even pay 0. You're obviously going to be looking at software for your businesses too. So we're also going to jump into software, fintechs, and banks in part 3 shortly after this video. So please tune in for that. And again, if you haven't gone and subscribed already, please go ahead and do so. Leave some love, leave some comments, put some questions in the comment section, and if you have any questions personally to me, you can write me an email at will.hodgson@forwardpointsolutions.com. And again, you can go ahead and check out our website or email our actual company at info@forwardpointsolutions.com. And we also have a meeting you can book directly with me down below for free. Have a nice chat with me and see what your objectives are and see how we can align with those objectives and potentially help you at Forward Point Solutions.